Hi, and welcome to Chapter 1. This week's Chapter 1, we are going to be reading A Ghostly Undertaking. Chapter 1. Another day, another funeral, another ghost. Great. As if people didn't think I was freaky enough. But truthfully, this was becoming a common occurrence for me as the director of Eternal Slumber Funeral Home. Well, the funeral home thing was common. The ghost thing, that was new, making Sleepy Hollow anything but sleepy. What is she doing here? A ghostly Ruthie Sue Payne stood next to me in the back of her own funeral, looking at the long line of Sleepy Hollow residents that had come to pay tribute to her life. I couldn't stand her while I was living, much less dead. Ruthie, the innkeeper, local innkeeper busybody, and my granny's arch nemesis, had died 2 days ago after a fall down the stairs of her inn. I hummed along to the tune of Blessed Assurance, which was piping through the sound system to try and drown out Ruthie's voice as I picked a baby's breath in the pure white blossom funeral spray sitting on the marble table pedestal top next to the casket. The more she talked, the louder I hummed and rearranged the flowers, gaining stares and whispers of the mourners in the viewing room. I was getting used to those stares. No matter how much you ignore me, I know you can hear and see me. Ruthie rested her head on my shoulder, causing me to nearly jump out of my skin. If I'd known you were a light seeker, I'd probably would have been a little nicer to you while I was living, she said. I doubt that. Ruthie Sue Payne hadn't been the nicest lady in Sleepy Hollow, Kentucky. True to her name, she was a pain. Ruthie had been the president and CEO of the gossip mill, and it didn't matter if the gossip was true or not, she told it. Plus, she didn't care much for my family, especially not after my granny married Ruthie's ex-husband, Earl, and especially not after Earl died and left Granny his half of the inn, and she and Ruthie, they owned it together now. And they both lived there, the inn where Ruthie had died. I glared at her. Well, technically, I glared at Pastor Brown because he was standing next to me, and he obviously didn't see Ruthie standing between us. Honestly, I wasn't sure there was a ghost between us either. It had been suggested that the visions I had of dead people were hallucinations. And I kept telling myself that I was hallucinating because it seemed a lot better than the alternative. I could see ghosts, talk to ghosts, and be touched by ghosts. Are you okay, Emily? Pastor Brown laid a hand on my forearm. The sleeve of his brown pinstripe suit coat was a little too small, hitting above his wristbone, exposing a tarnished metal watch. His razor-sharp blue eyes made his coal black greasy comb-over stand out. Yes, I lied. I'm fine. Fine as a girl who was having a ghostly hallucination could be. Are you sure? Pastor Brown wasn't the only one concerned. The entire town of Sleepy Hollow had been worried about my well-being since my run-in with Santa Claus. No, not the spirit of Santa Claus. He hadn't visited me yet. 3 months ago, a plastic Santa had done me in. It was the darndest thing, a silly accident. I banded the flower arrangement and soothed the wrinkle in the thick velvet drapes, remembering that fatal day. The sun had been out melting away all the Christmas snow, and I decided to walk over to Artie's Meat and Deli over on Main Street, a block away from the funeral home, to grab a bite of lunch since they had the best homemade chili this side of the Mississippi. And I just opened the door when the snow and ice around that plastic Santa Artie had put on the roof of the deli gave way, sending the 5-year, 5-foot jolly man casting down on my head and knocking me flat out. I knew I was on my way to meet my maker when Chicken Teeter showed up at the hospital bedside. I had put Chicken Teeter in the ground 2 years ago, but there was something telling me all sorts of crazy things that I didn't understand. He blabbed on and on about guns and murder and all sorts of dealings that I wanted to know nothing about. It wasn't until my older sister and business partner, Charlotte Ray Raines, walked right through Chicken Teeter's body, demanding that the doctor do something for my hallucinations, that I realized I wasn't dead after all. I had been hallucinating. That's all, just hallucinating. Doc Clyde said I had a case of the funeral trauma from working with the dead too long. Too long? At 28, I had been an undertaker for only 3 years. I had been around the funeral home my whole life. It was my family business, currently owned by my granny, but run by my sister and me. Some family business. Ruthie tugged my sleeve, bringing me back out of my memories. And her, she said, pointing across the room. Every single one of Ruthie's fingers was filled up to its knuckles with rings. She had been very specific in her funeral preneed arrangements and a diagram where she wanted every single piece of jewelry placed on her during her viewing. The jury jangled as she wagged a finger at the Sleepy Hollow's mayor, Anna Grace May. I've been trying to get an appointment to see her for 2 weeks, and she couldn't even make time for me. Huh. Doc Clyde had never been able to explain the touching thing. If Ruthie was a hallucination, well, then how could she touch me? I rubbed my arm, trying to erase the feeling, and watched as everyone in the room turned their head toward Mayor May. Ruthie crossed her arms, lowered her brow, and snarled, "Must be an election year, her showing up here like this." "Well, she is pretty busy," I whispered. Mayor May sashayed her way up to see old Ruthie laid out, shaking hands along the way as if she were the President of the United States about to deliver the State of the Union speech. Her long, straight auburn hair was neatly tucked behind each ear, and her tight pencil skirt showed off her curvy body in just the right places. Her perfect white teeth glistened in the dull funeral home setting. If she wasn't close enough to shake your hand, the mayor did her standard wink and wave. And I swear that's how she got elected. Mayor May was the first Sleepy Hollow official to ever get elected to office without being born and bred here. She was a quick talker, good with people, who made up the majority of the population. She didn't know the history of all the familiar generations, how my grandfather had built Eternal Slumber with his own hands, or how Sleepy Hollow had been a big coal town back in the day, which made her a bit of an outsider. Still, she was a good mayor, and everyone seemed to like her. All the men in the room eyed Mayor May's wiggle as she made her way down the center aisle of the viewing room. A few smacks could be heard from the women punching their husbands in the arm to stop them from gawking at her. Ruthie said, "I know, especially now with that new development happening in town. It's why I wanted to talk to her." New development? Well, this was the first time I'd heard anything about a new development. There hadn't been anything new in Sleepy Hollow in, a long time. And we could certainly use a little developing, but it would come at a risk of disturbing Sleepy Hollow's main income. The town was atop a destination in Kentucky because of our many caves and caverns. Any digging would wreak havoc with what was going on underground. But before I could ask Ruthie for any more information, she said, "Well, it's about time they got here." In the vestibule, all the blue-haired ladies from the auxiliary club, Ruthie's only friend, stood side by side with their pocketbooks hooked in the crooks of their elbows. They were taking their sweet time signing the guest book. The guest book was to be given to the next of kin, whom I still hadn't had any luck finding. As a matter of fact, I didn't have any family members listed in my files for Ruthie. Ruthie walked over to her friends, eyeing them as they talked about her. She looks like she was chomping at the bit to join in with the gossip, but put her hand on her mouth. The corner of her eyes turned down, and a tear balanced on the edge of her eyelids as if she'd realized her fate had been truly sealed. A flash moment caught my eye, and I nearly groaned as I spotted my sister Charlotte Ray snaking through the crowd. Her fiery gaze leveled on me, and I tried to sidestep around Pastor Brown, but was quickly jerked to a stop when she called after me. "Did I just see you over there talking to yourself, Emily?" She gave me a death stare that might just put me next to old Ruthie in the casket. "Me? No," I laughed. When it came to Charlotte Ray, denial was my best defense. My sister stood much taller than me, her sparkly green eyes, long red hair, and the girl next door looks made families feel comfortable discussing their loved ones' final resting needs with her. That's why she ran the sales side of the business while I covered almost everything else. The details. That was my specialty. I couldn't help but notice Charlotte Ray's pink nails were perfectly matched to her pink blouse. She was perfectly beautiful. Not that I was unattractive, but my brown hair was definitely dull if I didn't get highlights, which reminded me that I needed to make an appointment at the hair salon. My hazel eyes didn't twinkle like Charlotte Ray's, and nor did my legs climb to the sky like Charlotte's. She was blessed with Grandpa Rain's family genes of long and lean, while I took after Granny's side of the family, average, short, and squatty. Charlotte Ray leaned over and whispered, "Seriously, are you singing something?" I shook my head. There was no way I was going to spill the beans about seeing Ruthie. Truth be told, I'd be positive that seeing Chicken Teeter while I was in the hospital had been a figment of my imagination until I was called to pick up Ruthie's dead body from the Sleepy Hollow Inn and Antiques, Sleepy Hollow's one and only motel. When she started talking to me, there was no denying the truth. I wasn't hallucination. I could see ghosts. I hadn't quite figured out what to do with this newfound talent of mine, but really didn't want to discuss it with anyone until I did, especially Charlotte. If she suspected that what was going on, she'd have Doc Clyde give me one of those little pills that he said would cure the funeral trauma, but it only made me sleepy and groggy. And Charlotte Ray, she leaned over and fussed at me through her gritted teeth. If you're seeing something or someone, you better keep your mouth shut. That was the one thing Miss Charlotte Way was good at. She could keep a smile on her face and stab you in the back at the same time. Then she went on. You've already lost Blue Goose Moore and Shelby Parks to Burns Funeral Home because they didn't want the funeral trauma to rub off on them. My lips were as tight as bark on a tree about seeing or hearing Ruthie. In fact, I didn't understand it enough myself to even speak of it. I was saved from more denials as the auxiliary women filed into the viewing room one by one. I jumped at the chance to make them feel welcome and leave my sister behind. Right this way, ladies, I gestured down the center aisle for the auxiliary women to make their way to the casket. One lady shook her head. Oh, I can't believe she fell down the end steps. She was always so good on her feet. It's so sad. It could happen to any of us, another blue-haired lady rattled off as she consoled her friend. Yes, it's a sad day, I murmured, and followed them up to the front of the room, stopping a few times on the way so they could say hi to some of the townfolk they recognized. Fall! Ruthie leaned against her casket as the ladies paid their respect. What does she mean, fall? Ruthie begged to know. Frantically, she looked at me and back at the ladies. I ignored her because answering would really set tongues a-wagging, and I adjusted the arrangement of roses that laid across the mahogany casket. The smell of flowers made my stomach curl. There was a certain odor to a room of floral arrangement that just didn't sit well with me. Even as a child, I never liked the scent. Ruthie, however, was not going to be ignored. Emily Raines, I know you can hear me. You listen to me. There was a desperate plea in her voice. I didn't fall. Okay, well, that got my attention. I needed to hear this. I gave a sharp nod of my chin and motioned her to follow me. Pulling my hand out of the rose arrangement, I soothed down the front of my skirt and started to walk back down the aisle toward the entrance of the viewing room. We barely made our way into the vestibule before Ruthie was right in my face. Emily, I did not fall down those stairs. Someone pushed me. Don't you understand? I was murdered. Chapter 1, A Ghostly Undertaking.